Good morning, my brothers and sisters. We welcome you to the Voice of Hope from the First Baptist Church of Maryfield, Virginia. And we thank God for you this morning. As I stated the last several Sundays, this nation is going through so much. But as always, God has a word just for you, a word of hope to take us through these various difficulties that we are currently encountering, such as the virus that is still out there and the virus called racism. But I want you to look at a word this morning with me, if you will, taken out of Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. It reads, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I'm come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land and a large land, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites." And I'm going to stop there. Once again, Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. For just a little while, I want to talk about a God of hope. A God of hope. If any of us are truly honest with ourselves, there have been times when we question God when it comes to human suffering. Questions like, why does systemic racism exist? Why is there so much hatred in people's veins? Why are there inequities and social unrest in the world? Why does this virus kill some but elude others? These are the questions that most people grapple with daily. When these inquiries are not dealt with right away, we get the sense that God is a million miles away. And there are times when we even wonder if he cares at all about our suffering. Things and events happen that will test the very core of our faith. Why would God allow an invisible virus to cause death and doom across the globe? Why would God allow a family member to lose a mother and father at the same time? Why does God allow a guilty drunk driver to live but allow an innocent toddler to die? Why would God allow racists and racism to exist to destroy a nation? Why does a black person's skin color cause a threat to some? Why are black men more likely to be shot by a police officer than a white man? See, the idea of suffering has perplexed and bewildered humanity for many centuries. We often ask the age-old question, why does God allow bad things to happen? This question has been debated in the halls of academia, in theological symposiums, around the dinner table, and even in our one-on-one conversations with God himself. To help us understand this question, we need to be mindful of the fact that we still live in a fallen world, a world that is affected by the reality of sin. As long as sin exists, there will be evidence of evil like racism, murder, hatred, division, jealousy, and anything that is contrary to the word and principles of God. As we arrive at our centralized text, we see that God's people, Israel, are in bondage, and they are encountering social disparities. They are living under the tyrannical rule and harsh labor of Pharaoh, who knew not Joseph. But as we peruse the history and the context of this story, one can conclude that the children of Israel wondered if God really cared for their welfare and amid enslavement and the devaluation of human lives. But as we fast forward, we can see that God does care. In fact, God was already working behind the scenes, preparing them for a miracle. While you are wondering, God is working. That's the good nature about God. See, the book of Exodus is a book of redemption. The word Exodus, it means coming out or the way out. The book of Exodus, in its theological context, can be divided into three sections: ruin, redemption, and relationship. It's a people in ruins that will be redeemed to form a relationship. God leads us through deep valleys to divine fellowship. Look at the text, if you will, Exodus chapter 3. Here we have Moses standing before God at the burning bush. Verse 7 says, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen," that's important, seen, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have," watch this, "heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I," another important word, "for I know their sorrows." Let's back up. "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows." Verse 8, "I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a land that is both good and spacious, to a land flowing with milk and honey." In these two verses, I see several affirmations that I want to lift. We have a God who sees, hears, and knows. These are what we call anthropomorphisms, which are literally ascribing human characteristics or emotions to God. Let's look at it. He's a compassionate God. Number one, he's a compassionate God who sees our afflictions. Here's the good news. God saw his people. More good news. God sees us right now. See, man only sees today while God sees tomorrow. He sees beyond today. God can see the source, the people, the power, and the reasons behind the afflictions. See, God is not some distant cosmic force being detached from human suffering. He is not blind, indifferent, aloof, or unperturbed to the needs of his people. He is a God of compassion and love, one who does not neglect, set aside, or forget about his people. But his word reveals to us in Hebrews 13:5 that he will never leave us nor forsake us. Even in the darkest, most difficult valleys of life, he is always with us. Psalm 34, verse 15 shouts to us where it says, the psalmist says, "The eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto our cry." But the text says their cry, but right now it means our cry. He hears our cries. He understands our afflictions. No matter what we are going through, he sees it all. He sees our heartaches. He sees our pain. He sees our tears. He sees our burdens. He sees our grief. He sees our hurts. He sees our worries, and he sees our afflictions. Then the second thing that I want to lift from this text, that God is a God of hope. He's a compassionate God who also hears our agonies. Not only does God sees our afflictions, but he also hears our agonies. He hears our cries. He hears the cries of a suffering humanity due to pains, suffering, agonies, and sorrows. He does not neglect, ignore, despise, or abhor the agony of his own people when they are afflicted or mistreated. The psalmist testified in Psalm 34:17, the righteous cry, and the Lord, watch this, heareth and delivereth them out of all of their troubles. The Israelites were under tremendous agony. They were bound in cruel slavery. They worked under unbearable conditions from sun up to sundown. They were mistreated. They were treated as free labor with no human rights. They were looked upon as property opposed to being people. What made matters worse was this. Their sons were to be killed at birth under Pharaoh's command. Every male child was to die on the spot. See, God was fully aware of their agonies and hardships. He heard their pain as it went forth from their space of sorrow. Psalm 34 verses 4 through 6 gives us hope in our present situation. Watch this. I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all of my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. In Genesis 21, in this particular narrative, there is a powerful story about Hagar and Ishmael that deals with God's coming to rescue, all because, watch this, he heard the cries of little Ishmael. Verse 17 says in Genesis 21, but God heard the boy's voice. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and asked her, what is the matter, Hagar? Don't be afraid, for watch this, for God has heard the boy's voice when he was crying. See, that's good news, to know that when we cry out to God, he hears us. He hears our pain. He hears our sorrow. He hears all of the stuff that we go through. And so the third thing I want to lift up in my final note is this, the final affirmation, that God knows our adversities. Not only does God see our afflictions, hears our agonies, but thirdly and finally, he also knows our adversities. No matter what we are going through, God knows all about it. Not only does he see the external afflictions that come against them or us, but he also knows and understands the eternal sorrows that rise up within them and within us. God knows, and he is fully aware of our adversities, calamities, trials, and tribulations that afflicts the human soul. God was aware of the taskmaster's whips. He was aware of the racial insults. He was aware of the challenges they faced. He was aware of their groanings. But watch this. The same God that heard the cries of Israel in the Exodus account is the same God that hears our prayers today in 2020. When we cry out about systemic racism, he knows. When we protest about social injustices, he knows. When we march against police brutality, he knows. When the black community mourns over the death of another black man, he knows. When we rise up and say enough is enough, he knows. When we rally in unity for justice and equality, he knows. But Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6 gives us hope. He knows us. I'm going to read it from the NET translation. It says, "O Lord, you examine me and know. You know when I sit down and when I get up. even from far away. You understand my motives. You carefully, when I travel or when I lie down to rest, you are aware of everything I do. Certainly my tongue does not frame a word without you, O Lord, being thoroughly aware of it. You squeeze me in from behind and in front. You place your hand on me. Your knowledge is beyond my comprehension. It is so far beyond me. I am unable to fathom it. So what is this saying? He knows all about us, and he knows about our situations. Now watch this, my brothers and sisters. Because God sees, hears, and knows, he promises to deliver and liberate his people. Verse 8. It moves from tragedy to triumph. It transitions from compassion to action, hurt unto healing, and defeat to victory. According to the text, he will accomplish 3 initiatives that involves a plan of deliverance and a plan of destiny. Number 1, he will deliver them from their affliction. The text says, I will come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptian. Verse 8. See, the word deliver in this verse translates to snatch away or to pluck out. He is coming to snatch his children from Egyptian slavery and bondage. He is coming to take away their afflictions, destroy their enemies, wipe away their tears, and take away their sorrows. Then the second thing that he would do, he would establish better circumstances. Notice the text, verse 8, and to bring them up out of that land. They are moving from Egypt, death, to Canaan, life. Let me say that again. They are moving from Egypt, death, to Canaan, which is life. Egypt is bondage, but Canaan is blessing. Egypt symbolized the world system under the control of Satan, operating upon the principles of force, greed, selfishness, oppression, cruelty, ambition, racism, and power. So not only will he deliver them from their affliction, not only will he establish better circumstances, but thirdly and finally, he will bless them with abundant blessings. Lord have mercy. See, the text says a good enlarged land flowing with milk and honey. See, God's description of the promised land as a land flowing with milk and honey is a beautiful graphic way of highlighting the agricultural richness of the land. It is a poetic description of Israel's land, emphasizing fertility and bounty awaiting God's people. God brought his people out of slavery in Egypt to a prosperous land of freedom and blessing. God has a way of turning disappointments into divine appointments, sorrow into celebration, adversity into adventure, persecution into praise. See, man's extremity is God's opportunity. If Job were here, he would say something like this. He would give you double for your trouble. See, once his children got delivered, then God would deliver them into their destiny. Once again, verse 8 says, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good enlarged land, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. See, in the history of mankind, there was another scene that cries for our attention. God, from the portals of heaven, saw the sins of the world. He heard the groanings of man and knew their condition. Jesus, the Son, told God the Father, prepare me a body that I may go down and rescue my people. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall perish believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. He came down to 42 generations to die on an old rugged cross and to be resurrected from the dead, to save us, to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, to give the spiritual sight to the blind, and to liberate the hurting, the bruised, the least, the lonely, the left out, and the left behind. But he's a God of hope to give us hope. We will overcome this. Because as the old folk used to say, this too shall pass. So my brothers and sisters, we serve a God of hope. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't despair. Just know one thing. In the midst of all that we are going through, he sees, he hears, and he knows. So my brothers and sisters, the most important thing at this time is for you to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. We want to extend that opportunity. Please write us, call us. Call us 703-560-3247. Or write us, First Baptist Church of Maryfield, 8122 Ransom Road, Falls Church, Virginia, 22042 is our zip code. Let us know that if you out there and you living a life of despair, living a life of hopelessness, write us. We want to help you. We want you to have this awesome relationship with Jesus Christ. So my brothers and sisters, once again, as we face these unusual times, I want you to know, before I leave here, I want you to know that he is a God of hope. God bless you, my brothers and sisters. Be safe. God bless you.